All right, so just want to welcome everybody to another episode of the Anchor Up podcast. Today we're going to have a little bit of fun. We get to hear about a crazy story, one that's written by our guest today, Mr. G.S. Gerry. Just want to thank you for coming on. I appreciate your time. I'm halfway through your book, and I must say, it's crazy. I
Yes, it is definitely crazy.
have a background in real estate, so listening to this story, I'm like, oh my God. So let's start it off there. Let's go. Tell us a little bit about yourself, maybe what your background is, and kind of what turned into writing this book.
Yeah, so for my day job, I do cybersecurity and credit card compliance. I do a lot of report writing anyway. We come and look at customers, payment systems, how they take credit cards, and ultimately how it throws to the back end, and making sure everything's secure. And so, I write 400 or 500 page reports, and I had a situation last year about like September, and I had to do a huge report. It was like 700 pages long, and I got done. I was like, man, I just wrote a novel. And I had this story that happened to me and my family back in 2019. So I was like, you know what? I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to write this book. So September happened, and then October 1st, I started writing it. So I wrote it entirely on my phone, actually, to start off with. Probably not the best idea, but I always have my phone on me, always working, doing something. So I started writing it, driving around, like, oh, that made me think of this or that. And so it's easy for me to write it on my phone, just I had access to it. But then, I feel like inspiration kind of strikes at a moment's notice. So I had just funny random things popping in my head. I'm like, oh, what about that? And then I just write it down. So that's kind of how I originally started writing the story. I had this situation happen to me and my family back in 2019 when we were in Colorado. We were just trying to sell our house, and pretty much anything that can go wrong will go wrong. And so this whole Murphy's Law situation.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's true no matter what you do. I mean, if you're trying to do something like that, like sell a house and all that, the littlest things could derail it, right? The littlest things.
Yes.
Agent a little bit late to an open house, or what was really funny towards the beginning of the book, the flyers didn't go out the way they needed to,
Yes.
and just different stuff like that is, sometimes it happens. It didn't populate to social media right away like they said it would. So those are little things. Yours is not
Yes.
little things.
No,
Not at all. I
I
mean, it
mean,
started little.
it starts out as little, yeah, and then just more things kind of keep happening. And the guy I originally hired to list the house, he was the guy who sold me the house, and so we already had a relationship and everything. I was like, oh yeah, it should be good. He's like, hey, 30 days or less, your house is going to get sold. I'm like, yeah, that's great. That sounds like a great thing. And it's just not how it went.
So let's dive into it a little bit. I mean, the book is the title of it's Meth, Murder, and Amazon, right?
Yep.
So talk us through that. Like, just tell a little bit of the story, right? So you're trying to sell a house, you were moving,
Yep. I was trying to
brought
sell
in
my
the real
house.
estate agent. Yeah. So give people a kind of a picture of what the book is kind of about. Like I said, I'm reading it.
Yeah.
I'm about halfway through, and I already can't believe all the stuff that's happened. It's
Yep.
crazy.
So, I usually ask people, how many real estate agents do you think it would take to sell a house? Excuse me. Everybody would be like, one, right? That's like the normal response. And, that would usually be the case. It doesn't take one. And in fact, takes three to sell my house in Colorado. I had one real estate agent, like I told you, he originally sold me the house, and we had a good relationship. But I was in the middle of looking at houses in Colorado Springs. We were going to kind of move further down south from our area, and we went to put an offer in a house on, about 2 weeks after we had our house listed, and all of a sudden, like, couldn't get a hold of him, not responsive. I'm like, what the heck is going on? This guy's like super responsive most of the time. So I'm talking with his like junior associate that works for him, and she's like, oh, he's actually doesn't live in this state anymore. He moved. He's in Arizona. I'm like, what? He
Yeah.
moved? Like when? He didn't say anything. Like, you don't think that would be important to say? And I confront him about it. I'm like, dude, what's going on? Like, you're always responsive. Like, you're always reaching back out to me. Like, I've never run anything in any situation like this. Your agent, told me this. And he's like, oh, well, I still have an office in Colorado there. I'm there all the time. Don't worry about it. It's not that big a deal. I was like, all right, I'll give you one more chance. And so that's kind of where the flyers come into play. Whenever you're going to sell the house, they'll send flyers to the surrounding areas, people that are renting houses as well as in apartments. And so he's like, hey, by this date, the flyers are going to go out. Well, this date passes like 3 different times because he's like, hey, this excuse happened one day, this excuse happened another day. It's like excuse after excuse. And I was like, all right, that's it. Like, I can't deal with this anymore. You're just not reliable. I'm going to go to this next real estate agent. So I switch agents. I go to real estate agent number 2, who was actually the lady who was working for my first real estate agent. She leaves. She goes to another real estate firm, and so I was like, "Hey, let me follow you. We're already in the state. We're off to a good start. So let's just keep the positive momentum going." And so that's when it really gets crazy. And so I switch agents, and you think that would be not a big deal, but it is a big deal. People don't realize, when you go from one real estate agents to the next, it's actually a whole process. They can't reuse any of the photos, they can't reuse any of the listings, the descriptions, nothing. So everything is basically start over from scratch. When I go to real estate agent number 2, she's like, hey, we're going to do this thing called staging. I had never heard of this term before. So I'm like, what is that? So they're like, hey, you got to like rip everything out of there. You got to move it to where we tell you. So I spent, like days and days with the family, cleaning the house, throwing stuff out, rearranging the things they told us to rearrange. Within 10 minutes, this lady comes in to do the staging, just rips everything apart like what we had just done and just completely turns it into a disaster to make it, stage ready. So I was like, this is dumb. I should have just left it alone and not even done anything. And
Yeah, it's
so we
that
do
thing
this.
of, if I knew you were going to mess it up worse than I did, I would have just left it the way it was so you could have messed it up the first time, right?
Exactly, right. And I waste my time, stress myself out. Like I got stuff to do. I got 4 kids, so like I don't have time to be playing these games. And so we do the staging, we get everything ready. The house gets listed, and we're good to go. At least that's what I think. And so we have some people come in. We have some showings, but nothing really results from it. And about a week later, I get a call from my mom, and she tells me that she has early stage lung cancer. And so we're like, hey, we're going to take a vacation. We weren't planning to go to Florida, but we might as well go there now. Plus, this house situation is just stressing me out. So we decided to take a trip down to Florida, me and the whole family. So we drive, and we're in Florida, and we're supposed to have an open house. And so I get a call middle of June, essentially, while I'm in like Panera Bread, at the parking lot of Panera Bread. I get a call from my second real estate agent. She's freaking out, and she's like, Gerry, are you there? Did you know that there's someone inside your house? She's like, Gerry, did you know? I'm like, excuse me? She's like, yes, there's someone inside your house, and they're hiding under the bed. I was like, what? She's like, yes, they're under the bed right now. There's no one supposed to be there, right? I was like, no, absolutely not. There's no one supposed to be there. She's like, all right, good. We already called the cops. So the cops are on their way, so when they do the open house, it's my real estate agent, and she's there with like the owner's like wife, essentially. So it's always like 2 of them that go in to do the open house. And so they go and they show up about half an hour early. They go and clear, everything, make sure it's nice, tidied, everything's ready to go. And so they go up the stairs, and then I have a loft in my bedroom, or in my house. Once you go around the loft, then there's the bedroom. And so they go into the bedroom, they open the door, and they see a body under the bed, and there's a leg hanging out. And so the lady that's with my real estate agent freaks out, screams, runs out the house, gets on the phone, calls the cops, and says that we must have murdered one of our children, stuffed their bodies under the bed, and that's really why we went to Florida. And so I'm like, what? Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Like, how do we get to that? Like, someone's under the bed to now I'm murdering my children. Like, I don't know how we make that leap, but it's essentially like, the world's
Yeah, like,
worst assumption
in
turns into the world's worst accusation.
yeah, in that part of the book, it's like, what are you talking about? I'm 1, 2, 3. They're all here. I'm looking at them right
Exactly.
now. It's like,
Yep.
what are you doing?
Yes. And so like the cops show up, they come and clear the house. They actually do find some hilarious things under the bed. I have 2 older sons. They had some airsoft rifles. So they're like, hey, there was no dead bodies per se, but we did find some, airsoft pistols under there. So, they pull them out, and, like, it's like, what's hiding under their bed? Is it a body? Are there weapons under there? Like, what's the heck's going on? So they basically say, yeah, everything's good to go, no issues. I'm good. So I lose the open house. My wife's upset, she's freaking out. And I was like, hey, it's okay. It's just a stupid thing that happened, right? Like, we already lost it. There's nothing we can do from it. And so this happens on a Saturday. And then I get a call 4 days later from the same real estate agent. She's like, Gerry, we had a meeting at work. We all talked, and we smelled something burning in your garage when we were in the garage on Saturday. I was like, well, was something burning? Like, what's going on? She's like, well, it smelled like burning plastic. I was like, okay. So it was like plastic actually burning? She's like, no. Burning plastic means that someone's smoking or making meth in your house, possibly in your garage. So we're going to need you to get a meth test done, or we're going to flag your house in the MLS for suspicious behavior. I, I was like, what are you talking about? Like, I'm making meth now? Like, what? You've been in my house like 30 times. Like, you've seen my family. Like, this is not like the best house, but it's a nice house. This isn't no meth
Yeah.
house, right? And so I was like, this is ridiculous. She's like, well, it's only $50. I was like, I don't care if it's 50 cents. I'm not paying to get a meth test done. Like, you've been in my house so many times. You've been in that garage like 50 times. Like, get out of here. Like, you're being stupid. So I was like, all right, I'm just going to fire you. So fire them. Been accused of murder now and making meth. I was like, I don't know what third time is, but I don't want to be accused of that next. So I just fire her.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, what do I do now? Because I don't know any other real estate agents. So I'm in Florida. I kind of tell my family, my aunt about it, and she knows a real estate agent in Florida, and he's really good real estate agent. He's like, hey, I know some people in Colorado. Let me reach out and see what I can figure out. And so I talked to the next real estate agent. She's in Colorado. And I explained to her kind of what happened. And she's like, Gerry, I've never heard anything like this. This is the most crazy thing I've ever heard. I was like, yes. Now imagine me being in this situation, how I must feel, right? And so she's like, I'm sorry to laugh, but this is so funny. I was like, oh yeah, it's funny. Like, I'm going to write a book about it. And that's kind of how it started. Like, I started telling people this story, and they're like, that's the craziest thing I've ever heard. Like, that, it sounds like you're making this up. I was like, yes, it sounds made up. That's how you know it's true, right? Because you can't make stuff
Yeah.
like this up.
It's one of those drunken party stories. They're like, dude, you will never believe what happened to me. And everybody goes, yep, don't believe
Right.
it. But I
Yeah.
just
Or
can't
they'd be
believe
like,
that. Yeah. How do you go from, oh my gosh, we see somebody underneath the bed, and how does that person immediately go to someone was killed? I mean, you see no
yes.
blood, you don't see anything like that. Somebody's under the bed. Like, there's all kinds of things that go through your mind. They're out of town. A squatter got in there. Somebody got in
Yeah.
to just live there while they're gone, or they whatever. But like, you went straight to the police to say someone's dead.
Right. And didn't even like say anything like, hey, who's that? Who's under there? No, just boom, run out the house. Someone's dead. That's the immediate first
It kind of
response,
makes
I
you
guess.
wonder, like, how was your life growing up? Like, what have you seen to where the first thing you think of, somebody's
Yep.
dead?
You know what I thought of is when this happened, right? Breaking Bad had been out for a while, and I hadn't seen Breaking Bad yet, and so I told people this story, and they're like, "Dude, that sounds like Breaking Bad." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And they tell me about the scene, whenever they're doing the open house and they're making meth in the basement. I was like, "All right, I got to watch it." That scene gets on, I'm dying laughing. I'm like, "This is exactly what everybody's talking about." Yep, I'm Heisenberg, right? That's it. I'm just going to be Heisenberg forever. So
That's
I tell
funny.
everybody, I'm like
And then, I mean, when you get
Heisenberg
to
in
the
real
point
life.
where meth in the garage. So, did you walk in the garage? Did you see somebody in there cooking something? Did you just peek in? Is my house burning down? Is everything
Right.
gone? Like, did you check? Like, what are you doing? And it's
Yes,
like, no,
and
I just smelt it. You just got to get this test.
well, and so in my garage, I had those big orange Gatorade containers. You win the football game, basketball game, whatever. They dump the Gatorade container on. So essentially, I had a Gatorade container, and there was like I'm sure they were smoking cigarettes or whatever. Something like might have been burning in there, and that's kind of where the burning plastic came from. Like maybe someone dropped some ash in there, it started melting it. But I was like, you could literally like this is the tiny 2-car garage. Like you could have literally walked in there and looked at it and be like, okay, there's clearly not meth in there. Like not to mention, like I said, you've been in my house like 25, 30 times. It's just so stupid.
Oh man. It's one of those things. I talk to a lot of people because, like I said, the story is interesting to me because I am a real estate agent.
So
So
you've
when
you've run
I'm
into this before.
Oh, I haven't run into meth in the garage, but who knows? I mean, there's a first time for everything.
Right.
But so I'm listening to this story and I'm listening to how this goes down. And a lot of it I tell people is kind of the same. It's like, okay, real estate agents, here's what you need to know. Low barrier to entry. Take a test, you become an agent. It's that easy.
Yep.
But also people think I got this license, I'm gonna put this sign in the yard, I'm gonna make $1 million, I'm gonna be like these dudes on TV. And I mean, that's not always true. So there's a lot of work that goes into it. So as I'm listening to to the book, because I'm listening to it and I'm like, well, yeah, that happens every day. And it's leading up to the craziness you're talking about, but like, oh, I can't get a hold of the agent now that we started working together. Okay, that's kind of normal. I hear that from a lot of people. Oh,
Yep.
the flyers are going, we promise. Okay, that's normal. That happens too, right?
Yep.
And then, the open house, oh, it got delayed. We were a little bit late or whatever. Like there's little, and then it hits you and you're like, wait a minute,
Right.
somebody died? Like as soon as that starts hitting, you're like, that's just a different level person right there. So I
Yes.
laugh at it because the barrier to entry being so low in real estate and a lot of people thinking it's easy, people for whatever reason, like find all these other reasons why it's not me. I'm the greatest agent in the world. There's
Right.
another reason this isn't happening. And half the time you got to tell those people it is you. You may not be cut out for this. Like there's a lot
Right.
of self accountability to this job and a lot that you got to do. And so like it those they must have been either really great agents where they never had to worry about making a sale that allowed them to run out and talk about murder and meth, or they were just cooking meth in their car and they had a body in the trunk. Like, I don't know. Like
Yes.
there's,
Yes.
two different sides to that. And so it's just interesting to hear it because you hear stories all the time from agents about walking into houses and seeing different things. And, this house was set up crazy, or I saw these crazy things here. I've told
Yes.
many of agents that I know here where I'm at, like, you've got to either listen or read this book. No story you've ever had is going to match this one, I promise.
Yes. Yes. Yeah,
It,
and
it
it's
just
crazy, right?
blows my
Well,
mind.
so after this happens, I'm on real estate. Like, I fire real estate agent number two, and like I'm super pissed off. I'm like, you know what? Like, I need to get my revenge. I should go tell the news about this. So, stupid me. I'm like, hey, this is going to turn out great. Sure enough, I send some emails out, reach out to the news in Colorado. I have a few of them reach out to me. I'm like, awesome, someone's going to hear my story. So they actually show up and do the interview. So I'm on Colorado news at like 9 o'clock at night one night. So I'm like, yes, this is going to turn out great. Well, I get a call from my real estate agent the next morning and she's freaking out. She's like, Gerry, what did you do? I was like, what do you mean what I do? I told you I was going to the news. Like I was going to get some revenge, right? Like people need to hear the story so they don't get like taken advantage of like I did. And she's like, no, Gerry, they put my sign in the very first frame of the news broadcast. So people are seeing the interview and they see my sign, not reading it, not listening to it. They think I did this to you. They're calling me. They're freaking out. They're like, how could you do this to this man and his family? Like, what the hell is wrong with you? You have got to take this down. And I was like, shut up. Are you kidding me right now? Sure enough, I go to the online article. Their very first picture is the house with the curb appeal, but then it's got the new real estate agent sign. And it says, hey, this happened by Remax. Keller Williams is the agency that he's with now, but people just saw the sign and immediately started calling her, blowing her phone up. So I'm like, great. Got to call the news agency. I go and tell them what
Wow.
happened, and they're like, all right, we have to take the broadcast down. We can't edit it. We can't do anything, even though it's the very first clip. We can't do anything with it. If we have to edit it, we have to take it down. So we're going to take it down. So I was on the news for like 9 hours, and then they scrapped the broadcast, took it down because they had the wrong sign in there. So even the damn news agents
Wow.
are just didn't know what they were doing. Like I don't know why they made that decision. Like I told them so many times, like, hey, make sure you don't put
Well,
my like real
if you
estate
think
agent sign
about
in
it,
there.
yeah, well, I mean, if I'm going to listen to this crazy story that has, like, I can't believe this would happen to anyone ever, much less it happened to this guy that called out and reached to us in the news, circuits. The best way to do the bombshell is to put the person's sign out there so that everybody knows who did it, and that creates the for people to come out,
Yes.
right? The anger and
Yep.
I can't believe it. And I mean, and they do kind of sometimes say that all publicity is good publicity, but probably not in that one. Like she was not. She
Yes.
probably had people she was working with then calling, going, "Oh my god!" Right?
Yeah,
Like,
she sent me screenshots too. She's like, my friends are like, hey, have you seen this? Like, I know you didn't do this, but the way this looks, it looks like you did this. So you might want to reach out to your guy there. And so she tells me, I'm like, oh my gosh, are you kidding me? Of course, I reach out, they take it down. The actual article is still out there in Colorado. You can find it, but there's no picture or anything. But it did
Yeah.
happen. And
That's
so, like,
crazy.
yeah. And even still, like, the interview itself is hilarious because, you're like, hey, they're just going to come interview you. You're going to tell your story and you're going to be done. And of course, that's not how it goes. They're like, hey, we want to have you go up the stairs. And so, like, you start walking up the stairs and, like, up, something made a noise. Come back down the stairs. Up, something else made a noise. Up, oh, you went too fast. You went too slow, right? And so up and down, up and down. Like, I go up and down the stairs like 150 times just to get the shot of them taking like 3 seconds out of the whole thing just for me going up
Just
the
working
stairs.
out.
Exactly.
That's crazy. So you guys finally sold the house with the third agent, right? And
Yes,
then
yes.
moved. So how's it been like since?
So we in the book we moved to Florida, which actually does happen. We sold the house in Colorado. It's supposed to take 30 days. Takes all of 6 months to sell the house. So 3 real estate agents, all the stuff that happened. You can imagine it takes a little bit of time to unravel the mess. And so I finally sell like in November. We moved to Florida right around Thanksgiving time. And so the house we moved to, I called it, Beautiful Life Circle in the book. Well, I can write a book now about what's happened in this house and call it an unbeautiful life because we've had issues with this house. Basically, we had the AC overflow. There's supposed to be a drip pan. It's supposed to cut off when the water reaches a certain level. Well, the component that was supposed to detect this got stuck, floods my whole downstairs, and I have to get my flooring redone in my whole downstairs. So I had hardwood. I was like, hey, I don't want to run into this issue again, so I'm going to do tile. So get some quotes, get some bids, pick someone kind of in the middle. That's usually what I do. I don't pick the most expensive guy. I don't pick the cheapest guy. Usually the middle is about the right price. So I'm like, hey, this should be good. Well, the guys come in here, take all the flooring up, and then they start laying the tile. And I noticed that they have no tile leveling clips. And this is like the very first section. I go over to these guys. I'm like, hey, I know you guys should probably use tile leveling clips. You don't want these things raising up, being unleveled. Oh, no. Don't worry about it. We got it covered. We got the tile clips coming. Going to be no issues. So it's me and my family. We're all upstairs in our second floor in our bonus room. Guys are like getting close to being done, and I start walking the floor. I'm like stubbing my toe on like areas where the floor is like this, like this, like this. And I'm like,
Oh,
guys, this is exactly what I told you was going to happen. They're like, hey, you're gonna have to call our manager. Call the manager. He comes out here. He's like, all right, count all the uneven tiles. I'm like, are you kidding me? I have to count the tiles. You can see like we got like a dang ship out here. All the baseboards and everything are all off level. And they're like, all right, count them up. So it's like 120 tiles they have to rip up, replace. They do that. So now, of course, I'm losing more time stuck up there. They do it. Well, this time it's not that the tiles are uneven. Now their tiles are hollow. There's not enough thin set underneath, so I could literally walk by and just like tap on the tile, like hollow, ting, 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 all over the place. I have to call the manager again. I explained to him, hey, now we don't have uneven tiles. We have uneven tiles and we have hollow tiles. Comes out, he's like, all right, we're going to count them all up, knock around. Now we're at like 150 tiles that need to be replaced. So I was like, that's it. Get these guys out of here. Find someone new. Like, they don't know what they're doing, clearly, because I've been in upstairs and, living room hell for like 2 months now. So I have to wait like 2 weeks. We had to actually reschedule one of the kids' birthdays. Finally bring the third team in, third attempt, and they finally get it done. But I essentially get stuck upstairs for 3 months with my family. Can't use my downstairs at all because it took them so many tries to redo the floors, redo the tiles, get the tiles right and everything. So
you were the true definition of third time's a charm.
yes, it was true. So it did take 3 attempts. I was stuck up there for 3 months, so I could call it like floods, floors, and AC connoisseurs or something like that. Like, and
Yeah.
just talk about it. And what's funny is
Months.
that after that happened, the the AC actually overflowed again, and I called some AC guys out, and I was like, "Hey guys, this is overflowing. I think this thing is stuck." Well, they tell me that the whole AC unit is crap. I need a whole new one. I was like, "Oh my gosh, are you kidding me? This is why this thing is overrunning." Whatever, I'll pay for it. So I have them do it. The AC unit is overflowing. They come out, replace the unit. I kid you not, within 2 hours of them leaving, the thing is starting to flood again. I'm like, what the hell? You guys are liars. Like, there's no way there's anything wrong with my
Wow.
AC unit. Call somebody else out there. Like, yeah, the stopper is stuck. All they had to do was fix this blow the line out and you would have had no problem. So I called the people who sold me the AC unit and I was like, hey, I want my old unit back because, this clearly wasn't the issue. You guys said that it was leaking and it wasn't. You guys were like trying to pull a fast one on me. They ended up telling me, well, we actually sent your unit to the scrap heap. It's gone. So you can't get your unit back. There's nothing you can do. You're just going to have to pay us. I said, well, first off, I'm not paying for a unit that I don't need. You guys threw it away. That's your fault. You should have waited till, there's a 3-day cancellation for a reason. If anything happens, I should be able to cancel my contract and get my money back. So I have this whole thing round and round and dance. Takes me like 2 months to finally work out a deal with the guys. But like I got the unit at like a discounted rate, but like I should have never even had to pay anything because like they basically misled me and they're like, well, we know that this was wrong. I was like, tell me how when the brand new unit did the same exact thing the old one did. There's no way.
Oh
So
wow.
I can almost like write a whole book series about like how Murphy's law is like Gerry's law, essentially like what can go
Yeah.
wrong will go wrong. And it certainly seems to happen a lot.
Man, that's crazy. Well, I tell you what though, it leads to interesting days.
Yeah, it's
You're
interesting
never
stories, right?
bored. You're never
Yes,
bored.
yes. And so after I wrote the book, I was like, that's it. If anybody wrongs me anymore, I'm just going to write them into my books as just something ridiculous. Like it's either some hilarious name or tell some ridiculous story. Like,
Yeah.
I'll get you guys back. I'm going to get you.
So are these? I mean, you've had countless things after that happen, like with the new house. But I mean, is writing stories like that, whether true or not, is that something that you're going to continue to do?
I think so. That would be something I would like to do. I mean, I feel like I have random hilarious things that happen to me all the time. And so like, I take these situations. I'm like, man, this is a crappy situation. Let me put a funny spin on it. I bet everybody, like people would like to hear this and they would think it was funny. And so that's
Well, I
kind of what
mean,
I'm going for.
just thinking about anybody in general too, right? Like, there's a ton of people that have stuff that happens to them every day, just like that happened to you, and they could put it in a book. I mean, that's a clever thing to go. Well, this happened to me. I'm going to put it in a book. The way you wrote it makes people laugh, right? It's
Yes.
funny. It's funny to listen to and it's funny to read because you're like, man, this and you see it coming too. Like you see the setup. You think this
Yes.
is great? No, let me tell you what really happened. So you're like, oh my god, they messed it up again. So you take the
Yes.
ups and the downs with it. But a lot of people just wouldn't think to do it. Just like,
Yeah, and I mean that's kind of what I was going with when I wrote the book. I'm the kid growing up. I played a lot of sports. So I was outside a lot. So I'm like, hey, if we got a book report coming up, I'm gonna figure out which movie I can watch to write this book report. Right? Like I don't have time to read. I don't have time to do any kind of book
yeah.
reading. I'm just gonna go read the book. I'm just gonna go
And
watch the
now you
movie. And
write
so that's what I would do.
700-page reports in the job you do.
Exactly. And so I think it's just even just a funny thing that I wrote a book considering like I wasn't an avid reader all growing up, but I mean, I read all the time now for
Yeah.
work. So it's just kind of a
So that's
necessary
another
thing.
part that I'd like to get into with you. So tell me, I mean, you wrote the manuscript basically on your phone. So you had it ready. If you thought of something, you could do it. But so for anybody that's out there listening that maybe they have a book idea, maybe they want to write one, what's the process to once you have your idea written? Like, did you publish it yourself? Did you find someone
I
to help
did.
you? How
Yeah.
did you go
So
about doing it?
I did it all myself. I did Amazon self-publishing. I kind of read into it. I felt like what I wrote and the way I wrote it, like you're either going to love it or you're going to be like, what the heck is this? Because like, books have a certain way, like books have rules. And I'm like, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do something different, right? Like I feel like when we talk, we don't talk in, complete sentences. There's lots of run-on sentences and, just other funny things that happen over the course of a conversation. And so that's kind of how I wanted to write the book, almost like you and I are having a conversation. And so like the narrator's voice will be present, kind of pretty much throughout it. But I want to give you like something funny or something to be like, what the F was that? Like every
Yeah.
page. And so, keep them coming back and then keep them laughing. But if you got a good story, right? Like stay true to yourself. I feel like, I'm always joking around, if you're funny, be funny. If you're serious, be serious. Like I'm
Yeah.
not the serious guy. I feel like if I tried to write a serious book, they'd call it like, why so serious? Because it would be just not serious at all. And
Yeah.
so self-publishing, that's what I did. I felt like it would be difficult to get an agent because if you write something really unique, like it's probably going to get like, it's going to get really great things said about it. And then there's going to be people that don't like it. So like, hey, I don't really understand why you would write it this way, or I've never read anything like this way. Like, why'd you do it that way? So it
Well,
makes
and
it
I would
kind of
imagine
difficult
they
to,
try to change your idea, right? I mean,
yeah, yeah.
this sounds better, that sounds better. I mean, you maybe not have went down that road because you self-published, but I would imagine publishers are like, oh, that's not what they want to hear. You want to do it this way, and so you did it kind of the right way, right? Let me do it my way, so it's
Yeah,
mine. I've heard a
exactly.
lot of
And
stories about that.
yeah, and I would send out like pieces of the book and stuff to friends and have them like, hey, give me some feedback. Like if this sucks, tell me now because I don't want to like send this out and then everybody's like, this is the dumbest thing I've ever read. Like, why would somebody
Yeah,
write something like this? And so it kind of started as an inside joke as I wrote it, and then the more I wrote, I was like, no, this is actually kind of fun. And so I really liked it as I started, which I didn't think I was going to like it at first. I was like, oh, this is difficult. You hear about people like writing and it's like takes them forever. But I started writing in October and I was done in January, and then I found a program called Scrivener, which I did all my editing on, but you can like edit it, compile it, add notes and all this stuff. Like I wish I would have found this before I wrote it all on my phone because they have a mobile version too. So it would have made it a lot easier, but don't know what you don't know when you kind of first start out doing something like this. So
sure. So, so would you would continue to self-publish, or do you think that having a publisher or somebody helping you would do it? So I mean, I guess when you wrote the book, what was your plan? Did you want it to be something just like if you like it you can buy it? Did you want to put something out there that you hoped a lot of people bought to become like a published author? There's different reasons people do stuff like that, but
yeah,
have
so
you gotten a lot of good feedback? Like how's it been going?
I have. So I've sent it off to a lot of, I've done some editorial reviews and, I'm like, hey, if it sucks, like they're going to tell me. And so a lot of them, I've gotten really good reviews and they're like, hey, this is like almost like Robin Williams on speed. I've watched plenty of Robin Williams stand up. So I was like, all right, that's a good compliment. Like, I'll take that. He's a
Yeah,
great
yeah.
comedian. And so, I mean, that's kind of what I was going with, like, just something different. And I wanted to like keep the reader engaged the whole way through. And so I feel like that's where books, movies, like they usually kind of fall short. Is like, hey, they're great for a time, and then all of a sudden there's these slow points, and it goes back up. And so, and I didn't want to do it like that. I wanted to just be like, hey, once I pick this up, I want to keep reading until the end. It's not a very long story, and so I, kind of keep the reader engaged from that perspective.
Yeah, I mean it's easy, and so again I'm listening because I listen to a lot of stuff. When you ride in the car and you do what I do, like listening is the easiest form of doing that. But it's interesting to even hear the guy listen to it, and I like how when you have like how it was narrated. Did you narrate it or did you have somebody else do it?
So I actually had someone else do it. I was like, "There's no way I'm going to come up with these crazy character voices and names because that's pretty much the thing with the book. Like the character names are probably the real funny part because I have
Yeah,
lots of funny names. Like I think I have probably the most normal name in the book. Daryl Greek, but everyone else has like something ridiculous. Or the guys who like really screwed me over in this process, like they get
yeah,
ridiculous names. And so
yeah.
I kind of run with that, but. I would say you mentioned from the like the publishing side. I would say the toughest part for me was the marketing. It still kind of is, right? Because usually if you're an eight or you're a published author, like you have a marketing team, you have all these things, and so you don't have to go and do all that stuff yourself. Now I have 4 kids, so I don't have a whole ton of like free time as is. So marketing, going on these social media sites, looking at all these different angles and stuff. That's the tough part, I would say, whenever you're doing it yourself is
Solo,
it's
right?
only going to be as successful as as you make it and as much time as you can put into it.
Yeah, I think that it's cool to do it on your own though. I talked to my son a little bit about stuff like that. So many people nowadays will pay to do a lot of different things that you could do. Now, granted, marketing and getting a lot of momentum behind a book or something that's being published, like there is an art to doing that. But I mean, you're proof positive that you looked up a way to do it. You found how you could do it on your own, and you don't necessarily have to pay a ton of money in your first starting out. You're
Right.
busy, but you were still able to do it, and it's there, right? And if you are willing to take the time, and I think that's the key is take the time, right? Like telling my
Yes.
son, it doesn't take long to cut the grass, dude. But when you get older, you can pay people to do it or you can do it on your own. And I just see in him, he's just like, well, I guess I'm gonna be paying a lot of money then. I'm like, damn,
Right.
that's
Like, how valuable is
what?
my time? I used to actually tell my wife this all the time when she'd be like, hey, why don't you cut the grass down? But like, man, I got this to do or that to do. Like, I pay this guy $20. That's well worth an hour, right? Like, I don't have time
Yep.
to do this. And so I think it's actually a good learning lesson. Like, hey, there's things that you definitely will be like, hey, my time's worth more than that. But there's other things you're like, either one, I can't afford that. So even if I could pay for someone to do it, I couldn't do it anyway. So I'm just going to figure this thing out.
Yeah, because I'm on the opposite end of that. So my talking to my son is always like, hey, like you need to do this stuff. You need to know how to
Yeah,
do it. Like, don't be
exactly.
lazy.
Skills.
And now that I'm retired from the Navy and I'm working jobs and a real estate agent, I have other things that I'm doing. I've started to understand people saying time is money.
Yeah.
Meaning, like you just said, like I could take the hour and a half to cut the grass, but if I pay this dude $20, which is not a lot, he cuts it and I still gain that hour back to do something else. I'm like, huh. Because before in
Yep.
the military, I did the job, I did what I did, and I didn't, whatever, I got paid.
Just do what you're told to do.
I had plenty of time.
Yeah.
I did have plenty of time. Nowadays, I don't have plenty of time. So it's
No,
smart to pay people to do things.
it definitely seems as you get older too, like time just speeds up, and the more kids you have, especially time speeds up because you're like, oh, first it's just me and my wife, and we have one kid, then two, then three, then four. Now we have number five on the way due in November.
Oh
So it's
wow.
like, yeah. So time is definitely one
Congratulations.
thing you can't get back either. So
Yeah,
thank
so you
you.
got young kids. I'm in the proud empty nester club now. My son graduated high school this year, and so now he's on
Oh,
his way
nice.
out. My
Congrats.
wife and I get to go travel and do some things. But
Yeah,
yeah,
that's kind of another funny story because I had my first one when I was 18. My wife was 17, and so I tell everybody we did the 16 and pregnant thing before it became popular
yeah,
before they had Teen Mom and stuff. Like it was literally so my oldest son he's going to be 17 this year, so he's a junior. He'll be or he's a sophomore. He'll be a junior. But it's like funny, right? And so I have one son that's 17. My youngest is going to be 9 in December. And then I have the new baby, which will be born around Thanksgiving. So we have this like 8.5 year age gap. And the joke used to be like, hey, once I hit 30, like I'm not having any more kids. Like that's it, we're done. And so I'm going to be
yeah,
36 this year. And so, I told my wife, like, hey, you broke the rules. Like, we weren't supposed to have any more kids. Like, we were supposed to be like 45, all the kids are out. And then it just
yeah,
kind of happened that way. And we're like, so
yeah,
blessed to have another one on the way because,
for
I love
sure,
kids.
man.
They're great.
Absolutely. So, is the story of what you guys went through for your house, is that like a topic of conversation at like barbecues or parties? Do you find your kids are running around like this happened to us, or do you meet people that maybe someone read your book and told someone about it and they realize they're talking to you? Have you ever had any of those moments lately of like, man, those people know who I am and I have no idea who they are?
I haven't run into anybody that's like, "Hey, I read your book," or blah blah blah. But I will randomly, if I'm going like out to eat with the family or whatever, and I feel like someone wants to know about the book, or I'm like, "Hey, this person like opened the door for me," and I seen there with their family. I'm like, "Hey, I wrote a book. Let me tell you about it." And so that's kind of what I've been doing. And so like I'll tell people the story, and they're
Yeah,
like, "What? That's crazy!" And I was like, "Yeah, hey." Sometimes I have a book with me. I'm like, "Hey, actually, I got a copy. Let me sign it for you and your family just to give it to them." And so like I try to
that's
take those
awesome.
opportunities just like network and market with people because I feel like the biggest impact is kind of those around you at first, especially when
Yeah.
you're starting out. Because like I think that's the toughest part when you're a new author or try something new. Like why would anybody buy a book from you if they don't know who you are? And that's the tough part with like the book industry because there's millions and millions of books out there. So what can differentiate you from the
Yeah, I
next
mean,
person?
that's what, like you just said it, that's with everything that you do. I mean, hopefully we can get some people to check it out. I know a lot of guys that I was in the military with that listening to you today talk about, hey, I wrote a book on this thing that happened to me, right?
Yeah.
I know a lot of guys that could write a book that would make you laugh. And I
Oh yeah.
just never thought like, oh, I should write a book about that thing that happened to me. So hopefully people see that and they're like, oh, I could do that too. But at the same time, hopefully they read your book, because I think a lot of guys like me and guys that were in the military, like having those shenanigans about things that you're doing, like all these
Mhm.
things happened, it's the worst ever. We're used to that all the time. Like it always seemed to happen to us when we left. Like when we would deploy or go
Oh yeah.
somewhere, that's when
Yep.
the world falls apart. You're like, what's going
Yep.
on? Nothing ever happens when I'm there. And your wife will say that too. Why does none of this stuff happen when you're here? I'm like, I don't know.
All right,
I
it's
called some
Murphy's
people
law.
before I left and told them to make sure the bad stuff happened when I was gone. I didn't want to deal with
All right,
it.
absolutely not. Yeah, I have funny stories in the military too. I was telling people like I could write a book about the military because
Yeah.
when you're enlisted, you're basically like a glorified janitor. People are like, oh, you worked in the military, wasn't that so great? I'm like, no, I'm basically like a glorified janitor. They're like, hey, all the planes are launched. All right, let's go clean something. Oh, this is done. Let's go clean something. So
Yeah.
I was working in the hangar one
And
time. Good.
was say what service were you in?
I was in the Navy.
The Navy. Okay. And what was your rate?
I was AT.
See, that's why you cleaned all the time, dude. No fought on the runway,
Yeah.
bro.
Oh man, what's funny is there was a situation that happened to me one time. We were in the hangar and we were done like early. We had launched all the planes, and so one of the chiefs comes out and he's like, "Hey, you know all those grates where all the halon's supposed to come up? We're gonna go take those up today, and we're gonna clean under there." First off, that's completely against the fire code. You're not allowed to do that. I didn't know that. I'm just a stupid AT at the time, like I'm on the side, whatever you say. And so we're cleaning around the grates and we had picked them up. And so we basically left like holes around the hangar. And so I'm cleaning one and all of a sudden, I went to like step in, and I thought my foot was, on the grate. Well, it wasn't. I'd fall into the hole, smack my head against the wall. There, my eye is just bleeding profusely, and I like jump out. I'm like, oh man, that hurt. I'm fine. Guy from across the hangar sees what happens, rips his shirt off, runs off after me. He's like, get down, like get down. I'm like, dude, I'm fine. I'm just bleeding. Like it's okay. I didn't like bust my head open. I'm like, need stitches or anything. But it was just like one of those funny things. I was like, yep.
Yeah.
And then of course, like after this happened, like the fire department comes. They're like, what the hell were you idiots doing? Like you're not allowed to do this. So like the chief gets chewed out, and I'm like, yeah, I told you guys we shouldn't be doing this. Like, this is just
Yeah.
dumb stuff that
Right.
happens. And so, like, that obviously
Yeah.
we never cleaned like that again. But, like, you mentioned FOD.
For
Like, there was
sure.
one time we were doing an engine change. Someone's screwdriver broke. So we spent like 9 hours searching for a damn screwdriver tip on the flight line in the
Oh
middle
yeah.
of the night. Just
I
ridiculous.
was in the CBs first when I joined the Navy, and then I retired as a recruiter. But I
Oh,
remember
nice.
being in the B's and going to load plan, and we were going to do water well, and we had to bring stuff from Okinawa to Japan to Korea. Man, we had to drive the trucks over the grates, and then they looked at our tires, made sure all the rocks were out. You had to clean it up because Okinawan dirt has mixed with Korean dirt. You can't do that. It's not going to work well. And it's like, geez, and
Oh,
dude,
man.
like that's a lot of work just to fly 2 hours. And
Yes.
then all my aviation buddies in the Navy, every time we would go do something in recruiting or, even the littlest thing happened, like, all right, it's time for a FOD walk down. And then they would all like turn around and look with like big eyes. And I was like, man, I don't really. And then they told me about like,
Yes.
if somebody drops you have your pin and there's that little piece that the clicker's on, that thing falls. No one's leaving until we find it.
Yep.
That
Yep.
thing
We
could go
did.
in the
We
jet intake. It could blow the plane up. And you're like, dude, birds fly through the freaking jet engine, dude.
exactly.
We don't
Well,
pick those up out of the air.
Yeah, right. That's when I realized that military planes are way more secure than commercial planes because we have to inspect them every time they come back. We have to walk around, do a plane
Yeah,
inspection. Like that's not what happened when the commercial planes come in. They're like, oh, boom, land, oh, on to the next one. Like they basically make sure the engine's attached and still running. Like you actually have to do checks
yeah,
every single time before the plane leaves. Every time it comes back, every 30 days. Like there's all these maintenance checks that just don't happen in the commercial world. So
sure.
when they're like, "Hey, this plane fell out of the sky or this thing happened," I'm like, "Well, it's not a surprise, right?" Like, there's things that we would definitely look for that would prevent some of that stuff. But sometimes it's like dumb stuff, like, "Oh, the static wick's off. Oh, well, we can fly with like this so many. As long as these few are, still attached, like it's good to
Yeah,
go." So they
I
just make weird
I
calls.
think the weirdest thing that I used to hear when I was active duty, and you would talk to aviation guys, didn't matter. ATAEAS, it didn't matter what the rate was. They would tell all these stories and laughing about people like me on an airplane, whether it was a 130 or a C5, just flying.
Mhm.
Helicopters were the worst too. Laughing because people that had never really flown would be freaking out because hydraulic oil was leaking.
Yes.
And they were like, oh, if it's not leaking, it's not working. And they'd start laughing. And I'm like, what do you mean? They're like, yeah, dude, if it's leaking, that means it's good. like, what do you mean it's leaking? He goes, that's how we know there's fluid still in there. I was like, get
Yeah,
out. You no.
it's dumb.
No. He's like, yeah, that's how we know. It's good. If there's no fluid, then you need to be worried. I'm like, but like you don't fix it. It's like, oh, they all leak. I'm like,
Yep.
man, I don't know if
Yeah, we
I
hit old planes. It's
yeah, I don't
probably
know
even
if
more so with the old planes too. Like if it's a new plane, then they're definitely more like, hey, all these
sure.
things need to be done the right way. Whenever they're older planes, are like, all right, just follow the
Hilarious.
procedures. And then if it's whoever's doing the QA
Yeah.
check, they'll be like, oh no, it has to be like coming out. Like I need to see like the stream.
Yeah, yeah. I think that you should probably look to write some stories from being in the Navy,
Yep,
especially as an
I
aviation
definitely could.
guy. There's so
Yeah.
many just dumb things, man.
Oh yes, there's a lot of things that happen. Like I remember whenever my wife had our first son, and we went like they let me off. I got time off to see her have the baby. I came back to A school, and then they're like, "Hey, we have mandatory physical training at like 6 a.m. Everybody better be there." And like we show up, and like I'm there on time, and the instructors were like, "Not there. No one was there." It was like 15 minutes. I'm like, "All right, that's it. I'm going back to bed." So like I go back, we go to sleep, we come back for class, and then I get pulled out of the class, and I'm like, "You damn idiot! You were supposed to be there. We were late on purpose to see if y'all would stick around." Get in the push-up position, and it was like me and like five of my buddies, and we were there like just getting drilled. They're like down, up, blah blah. Like you guys are stupid. Why would you do that? Down, up. Why would you do that? And then they would like hit on me like, "Hey, we just let you go see your baby be born. Like you're gonna be a jerk like that, all right, down, up, right?" And so it was just on and on for like an hour. They
And
were
so
just
the whole
destroying me.
time when it's happening, right? When you're that new in the Navy, you're like, oh man, I really messed up, right?
Yes, yes. And I
But
was like,
today I
and
would
then I
be
was like,
like,
this is the dumbest thing.
yeah, I'm like, so you're telling me you wanted me to be 15 minutes early to be on time so that you could be 15 minutes late to see if I was dumb enough to wait for you guys to get there?
Yep, yep.
Don't be mad at me because I'm smart. Like, I'm going, like,
Exactly.
like,
That's
come
what I was
on.
doing. I was like, man, it's too early for this. I'm just gonna go lay down. Plus, all
Yeah.
we're gonna do is some dumb push-ups and
Did,
sit-ups and run like a
you
mile.
just, you asked the instructor, you guys have heard of the 5 minute rule, right?
Or,
If you
oh
guys
yeah,
weren't here 5 minutes after we started, we're leaving.
right.
That's
If
how it
you're on
works.
time, you're late. If you're early, you're on time. They
Oh, and
didn't
if you would
follow
have
that
told him
rule.
that, that would have been the best. Well, you guys
Oh
told
yeah.
me being early is on time and on time is late, and you guys were late. So what is that?
Oh, exactly. And you know what's even funnier is like when you get in trouble, they like make it a point to be real big jerks. And so they're always like, look at me when I'm talking to you. But when you're in trouble, you like go to look at them like, don't look at me, look at the wall. Like you're not allowed to look at me. Like you don't get that respect. And so
So how
just
many
stupid
years did you
stuff
do
like
in the
that.
Navy?
I did 7 years.
7, and got out as a second class, first class,
I actually got out as the third class. Yeah.
third. Okay.
Whenever I was in, it was, once you hit like third class, then to get to second class, it was like they would promote like less than 5%. So even if you got like a perfect
Well, and
score,
you were an
all the
AT,
P&A
so that's a
points.
pretty,
Yeah.
yeah, it's a tight
Yeah.
rating.
There was like
Well,
three
you know that
times
your
that I
chief.
could have. Oh, good.
No, no, go ahead.
I was just saying there was like at least three times in a row where I would take the test, even if I got a perfect score, got all the P&A points, I still wouldn't have advanced because it was so competitive. And so
Yeah,
I was getting my
CBs were like that
degrees.
for a long time.
Yeah, I was getting my bachelor's degree at the time. So my plan was always to join just to get my degrees and then get out. And so I had my bachelor's degree, and then they had a program where I could get my master's in 2 years. So I just kind of did all 6 years, got my master's degree. So I got my master's a year after I got out of the military.
Nice. Yeah. So I can guarantee you that your chief would tell you to look at the wall while he's talking to you, because if you look at him and he's mad at you about being late when he knew he was late, he'd probably start laughing.
Yeah, you're probably right. And
Uh
like
huh.
there's more than one
Oh, I
times that I
know.
got yelled
I
at
retired as a
or
senior chief, dude. I, I got it.
yep. And it was funny too.
It's
Like some of the
hilarious.
chiefs were really big jerks, but other ones were like really great to work with, and the officers were usually like cool to be around. But if you got in trouble, then they were like the biggest jerks.
Yeah.
Only
Well,
a
they're taught.
sticklers whenever something's wrong.
They're. Yeah. Well, so that's how it should be. And so as I get out of the Navy, and I retired in 19, and now I work on the other side where it's the civilian side. I'm like, man, like you guys are making a big deal out of something that's really not that bad. I don't understand.
Yes, yes,
And then it's like, oh, everything drops right now. You got to fix your email signature. I'm like, I mean, I put
Oh
my
yeah.
name and number in there. It's not to the company or whatever, right? You're like, geez,
Yes. The
in the
stupid
Navy, they're
rules and
like, did the email
regulations.
send? We're good to go.
Yes. Yeah, the things that they choose to be like real sticklers about and the things they let go just make no sense. It's like
Yeah.
whatever day it is, they just decide one way or the other how they're going to be.
Well, that's why I like doing real estate, and that's why I like doing the podcast. That's why I like doing. My wife and I own a T-shirt company now. I'm actually wearing one of
Oh,
our
heck yeah.
T-shirts because
I was
we
thinking about
work
doing
for
apparel.
ourselves,
Hell yeah.
and you bet on yourself. So if you fail, then it's on you.
It's on you.
Yeah, 100%. But it's good to see the other side. I tell you what, though, if you run long enough, you could make a lot of money on leadership development and stuff like that if people were open to it. A lot of military guys could do well there. um,
Yeah.
and then there's probably, just talking to you today, there's probably a ton of authors. I know a lot of guys that could write stories,
Oh yeah.
and like, I've heard the stories and I couldn't stop laughing. Could you imagine putting it in a book?
Yes, yes, exactly. And then putting like a funny spin on it because it's almost like Kevin Hart has the stand up series, laugh at my pain. That's
Yeah.
almost what it is, right? Like you're like I'm telling it in a funny way to make people laugh, but essentially they're laughing at me, which is totally okay because these are like ridiculous things. Like I laugh after the fact when it happened, but it
Oh
wasn't
yeah,
funny when
today
it
it's
was
funny.
happening. Yeah,
Today
it
it's
wasn't
funny.
funny when it happened though. That's
Mm-mm.
for sure. I was super mad.
And but that's what I mean. Like, me looking at it from like a real estate agent perspective, I'm like, that guy was so pissed. I didn't have no flyers. There's no open house. These people aren't looking. Oh, the market's just moving a little bit slow. Well, no shit, it's slow. You're
Yeah,
not putting the flyers out. You're not getting people to look at it. You're not, like, you ain't doing your job.
exactly.
But see, a lot of
Yep.
agents will delay to going, oh, the market's just different. I'm very interested, actually, going forward now, next 3-4 months, how these real estate agents are going to explain to the clients that are selling houses why they're not getting 50 offers and 100 grand more than they wanted to put it on, like their friend
Oh
down
yeah.
the street got. That's going to be
Exactly.
epic.
Oh yeah, it's crazy because like ever since we bought our house, like the market's like changed so dramatically. But now you're in
Yeah.
the situation like, hey, yeah, I'm going to make a great profit on my house. How much am I going to have to pay to get in the new one? And so, yeah, I would sell, but I'm not going to pay like
Yeah.
$700,000-800,000 to get into like a $400,000 house. No way. That makes no sense. I'll
Well,
just
and
let the
so I
value
think
accumulate.
I think that's going to be the issue. That's going to be the turning point. A lot of people think that it's going to be bad to go into like a 2008 and 9 kind of deal. Like, there's no way we're
Mhm.
going back there. We do not just give people money even if the house isn't worth that. You have to pay what it's worth, or pay the difference. So
Yeah.
the problem is that real estate agents, and you're constantly trying to be the best in your market, and for whatever reason, being the best means you sell at the top dollar. Well,
Yep.
no, you can't look at the comparable sales right now and get a good estimate of what the house is worth, because if somebody came in and was willing to pay cash 100 grand more than the house is worth, if they would have done an appraisal, it wouldn't have been worth what that person paid. So some
Yep.
agents rely on the sold data and the listing systems to get their pricing, and that's where that lack of experience and low barrier to entry is going to hurt people, because you're going to have to answer hard questions. People that are looking to sell their house
Yes.
are like, why don't I have offers? This is crazy. Normally houses are
Oh
off the
yeah. Right.
market
It's
in
a
2 days.
It's a seller's market. Why is the house still here? It's not even the
Correct.
weekend yet. Calm down.
Yeah, but heaven forbid you got to go 2 weeks to sell a house nowadays.
Right. And like I felt like I was being patient. Like I wasn't freaking out. I was like, hey, what's going on? It seems like we
Yeah.
should have had something by now, right? Like this is, it's certainly lots of comparables in our neighborhood had just sold within the last 60 to 90 days. So I was like, hey, we're in a good spot. And they're like, oh yeah, it's no big deal, right? Everything's just no big deal. Like, oh, it'll sell, right? Like it's just gonna sell itself is
And
basically
I
what
mean,
these
that's
guys say.
true. Eventually it's going to sell.
Yes.
Eventually. So every
Eventually.
agent's right. Like, oh, we just got to give it some time.
Right? You just
3
got to
years
find
later.
that one. You just got to find that one. I was like, yeah, just that one, right? Like, what the heck are you guys doing?
Oh, that's crazy, man. Well, I mean, it was great talking to you. I'm happy that I got to talk to you. I know the last time we were going to talk, it just kind of didn't work out, but it's been interesting to read the book. I plan on getting it finished here soon, And if you ever write another one, I need to know because I'm definitely going to
Oh
get
yeah,
it because it's going to
definitely.
be funny. But what
Yes.
I would tell you to do now is just let everybody know the title, where they can pick it up, how they can get the book, and then if they ever wanted to get in touch with you for anything, if you're willing to do that, like share with
Yeah.
how people can find you.
Yeah, yeah. So the book is Meth Murder on Amazon. Yes, it is that Amazon, and you can actually buy it on Amazon. So it's available in paperback, hardback, ebook, as well as the audiobook. Audiobooks through Audible, iTunes. I also have a website. If you ever want to go onto the website, check out what I really cook. It's not just meth. I actually do make pretty good food, so I have some food photos and stuff up there. But my website's grakeden.com, Grakeden. Main character in the book is Mr. Grake, so that's kind of where that comes from. And like you mentioned, hey, you got some apparel. I'm going to be working on that too. Get some apparel, some memorabilia, things like that. So I also
Yeah.
sell NFTs too. I haven't really done
Oh,
much with
really?
it, but there are a few NFTs I've created kind of out of this. I was like, hey, I'll send you a signed copy and give you an NFT if you get one of these. And so I had my father-in-law, he bought one, but I was thinking about doing something different with it. Gary V, he has like the books with the games. And so I was going to kind of take a play on that. And you remember, dang, what was it? They're the old school like retro games. Dang, I used to remember it now. I can't forget. But it was basically like pinball. These are little like tiny like old school retro games. Make a paper airplane, throw it, play football, whatever.
Hmm.
Shockwave. If you ever played Shockwave when you were younger, they had all those fun little retro games. I was going to make
Hmm.
like an NFT game essentially, or a game that the NFT was like access to, and there's all these little different retro games, and so you had to buy the NFT to get access to it. I haven't got that to take off, but I got a few different ideas.
Well, that's awesome. So yeah, I hope people reach out. I hope they can connect with you, and we're just excited to see the next book. Who knows? Maybe
Thank
your
you.
future career is in writing crazy books.
Hey, maybe there's the National Lampoons, right? The Griswolds. I feel like this
Yeah,
is right up that alley, right? Like
that's
they
part two
deal
right
with
there,
the
man.
dumbest things.
So you've sold one, you got a crazy story. You moved into one with a crazy story. The next thing you need to do is buy the vacation home, so that can be a crazy story,
Oh
right?
yeah, yes. It's
There you
funny.
go.
Like my wife, she actually has seven brothers and sisters, and so it's always a grand adventure when we all get together around the holidays and stuff. So I was thinking about writing a book, and instead of like they have these reality TV shows, I would almost make it like a reality TV show drama, but in a book. So I would take like kind of the fun elements from a reality TV show, and I'd be like through the lens of a reality TV producer or something like that, and just tell like funny little stories or short stories as part of the overall book about me and
That's
my
awesome.
family and my wife's family. And I was like, I don't think there's anything out there like that, but that could be fun.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, how many people will sit down for hours and watch the reality TV? I would imagine people would read
Exactly.
it.
Yeah, so I feel like there's probably like I could probably write five or six different books and just different funny things that have happened, even if it's not like necessarily in the house, but just that have
Yeah,
happened in
I
my
think you
life.
should do it.
I definitely want to. This is the
Yeah,
goal.
man. Well, again, I
But
appreciate
thanks
your
again for having me
time
on.
for
Yeah, thanks for
sure.
having me on.
If you ever want to come back on, or if you got another book coming out, or there's anything we can do to help you, just reach back out, man. We would love to have you on again.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely keep that in mind. And yeah, thanks again for having me. It's been
All
a
right, brother.
pleasure.
Have a great day. Thank you.
All right. Thanks. You too.